Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. It is a book that just came out in March, so actually a fairly new book, and I have had it on my radar for a couple of months when I first saw the cover, and I was like, I like that cover. Also, it somewhat helped that I'm also writing a book right now that is set in the late 1800s. Westie's one is around 1887. Though obviously the books after that are going to be a couple, like in a little close time period. And then like the prequel, which is their father, is going to be somewhat before that. However, it's in the time period. I was like, I'm going to add that anyway. Now, if you know much about me, revenge stories are not really my bag at all. But I still gave it a chance because I also, regardless of whether stuff is exactly like, oh, I know that I'm going to like this, I still try to give things chances because things that I thought I would like, I end up not liking. And things that I'm like, that's not usually my thing, can be very surprising. But this did not win my heart over to revenge stories, but it did make me think exactly why I think revenge stories don't really jive with me. So that'll be part of the discussion at the end, and I would love to hear your thoughts on how you feel about revenge stories and how you kind of conceptualize and think about revenge stories. And that isn't to say that revenge in stories doesn't have a place. I'm talking about like revenge stories that are specifically about like seeking revenge are not really my bag, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just not something that I personally enjoy. And we'll get into that later when I'm talking about it. However, I'm glad that I read this book. I'm glad for the experience. And at the very least, he has a very interesting concept of vampires, which I'm also looking forward to your guys' thoughts on. And I'm looking forward to the conversations regarding this book. I really haven't seen a lot, though granted, I haven't been looking a lot other than on Goodreads. And I'm ready to discuss what was in this book and the choices that were made. However, before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creative genius. And the second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter and the cover, that chapter will be read here to hopefully help more readers find your work. They may be me, they may not be me, but regardless, like if you look at this, it is so well received. It is like almost all 5 stars. Very few people disliked it. The people that did dislike it, at least that showed it with a 1-star rating, DNF'd it, usually all for the writing style. So really, I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion of the concepts in this, which we're going to talk about. But that's to say, obviously, my taste is very specific because I like the low-rated stuff, apparently. Empress Teresa, come my way. The Buffalo Hunter. There is the pasture prairie to enjoy. Anyway, the reason why vampires never die is because they live on in different forms forever. Like, vampires are not just a legend of mystery. Am I serious? That is for you to judge. But no, vampires don't die. They just change forms, even if it is aliens. Oh, and the third thing is, sorry, I got so distracted with that. I am sorry. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books. With that said now, let's jump into it with the first page reading to sample the way that it is written. Quote, 16th of July, 2012. A day worker reaches into the wall of the personage his crew's revamping and pulls a piece of history up. The edges of its pages crumble under the fingers of his gloves, and I have to think that, if his supervisor isn't walking by at just that moment, then that construction grunt stuffs that journal from a century ago into his belt to pawn or trade for beer, and the world would never know about it. If this works out, though, then I owe that day worker my career. In January, I wasn't exactly denied tenure, but I was told that, instead of continuing with my application, In January, I wasn't exactly denied tenure, but I was told that instead of continuing with my application, I consider asking for the extension I'm currently on. The issue wasn't my teaching. I'm a day worker of communications and journalism, covering all of the 1,000 and 2,000 level courses. It's that my publications aren't up to University of Wyoming's standards for promotion. See, get a book under contract, Etsy, and then we'll talk. And if you don't, then all of your schooling, all of your dreams of being a professor, there's smoke, and you're out in the cold. until that random day worker reached into that wall, until what he found wrapped in a mouse-chewed buckskin wound up in the hands of Special Collections librarian Lydia Ackerman of University of Montana stayed up in Bozeman and was able to read the scripty hand enough to glean the name of the very front page. Arthur Beaucarn. It's not far from there to me, that surname not exactly being common. And because technically that journal belongs to me, well, my father than me, but my father is in the facilities and Denver's not exactly compos mentis. Lydia Ackerman's been sending me the digitized pages as they're processed, the original being a century too delicate to handle. But I don't think that she does it out of kindness. It's to keep me from showing up unannounced again. So this first chapter is about the first narrator of the three narrators we're going to be introduced to, and her name is Betsy, who just so happens to be related to the person that this journal belongs to. Now, the journal belongs to a man named Arthur Beaucarn, who was a Lutheran pastor around the time of 1912. That's her great-great-great-grandfather. So she has a right to the journal, which obviously that professor in Montana is like, I don't want to give it to you. However, the narrator is then reading the journal as she gets those pages and is trying to figure out what exactly happened to Arthur Beaucarn, because at some point he just straight up disappeared and she has no idea. There's no information. There's never been any information, and that kind of goes into a dead end in her lineage. One of the first things that she mentioned in the journal was a murder that was happening around Buafflo and that no one was quite sure where the murders were coming from. It just looks strange, like men found in fields covered in buffalo skin. Arthur is sent to this place where he gets information from to scope, especially because he is a holy man, though people also don't seem to trust him for the same reason that people do trust him. It just depends on who the person is, and that is like sending him into different places with different races of people, and depending on your background, you're gonna trust him more or less. Eventually, Betsy sits down to really dig into this journal after she takes care of her cat. Now, this will be the last time we see Betsy until the last 50 pages of the book. She just bookends this book. The majority of the book will be switching between perspectives of Arthur and Arthur writing the Indian Goodstab, because all of this journal that is from Goodstab's perspective is actually Goodstab talking to Arthur and then Arthur writing stuff down. So then those chapters are still even just from Arthur's perspective of taking Goodstab at his word and then writing that down. So switching first to Arthur, because it is Arthur's journal, Arthur is recounting this day that the strange Indian man started showing up at his church in Montana. He was dressed very oddly for how his people are usually seen, wearing Jesuit robes, and Arthur can't quite figure out why this man may have come to service the way that he did. He's also got big sunglasses on. Arthur goes over in his mind all of these different things that could have brought him to church, and eventually when he finally approaches him, the Indian man flees. Quote, he did not look back once, confirming the pursuit he seemed to expect, his wild-born instincts keenly aware of such things, but by the time I reached the back of the chapel in my limping manner, this Indian gentleman was striding away into the daylight, his Jesuit robe swinging around his long, purposeful strides, his hands tucked into the cuffs of opposite themselves, the dogs of Sunday morning giving him a wide berth, which is the first time that I've seen such a phenomenon my time in Miles City. But surely it is the bear grease in his hair that forces them to keep their distance, or the scent of tragedy on his skin, or that he was keeping to the shaded side of the street where the warmth isn't, or maybe not seeing his eyes, they don't know if he watches them or not, so can't guess the next sudden movement, can't anticipate his intentions. To them, he's a berobed, glassy-eyed creature whose predilections are yet a mystery. After some time, the Indian man does finally start speaking to the pastor. He keeps coming back to the church until finally he does talk to the pastor, and he says that he is there because he wishes to confess something, though it will take time to get there because he wants to go through his entire life story to the pastor. They start building rapport with one another, and the man is saying that he comes from the Piikuni tribe, and also that he doesn't collect scalps, though he is wearing cavalry shoes, and Arthur notes that this is what many did to their victims, taking their clothes. Arthur is very personable, being gentle with the man as he learns that his name is Goodstab. Such is the burden of the clergy. the burden and the gift. I submit willingly, O God. I am but your servant in this and all things. With your guidance I can endure this and more for Sundays eternal. And because I knew this new state, when it was but a territory, and have comported with Indians before around fires, and even twice in a smoky lodge of a kind that won't be seen again, the wind and snow howling outside in a way that we see too much of here in the state of Montana, I knew what I had to say next in ceremonial fashion to invite him to begin his story. I listen with a good heart. Good Stab looked at me briskly. Upon hearing this, a joyful shine in his eyes, and I nodded the truth of my statement as he began. The origin story of Good Stab starts going back 80 plus years. He doesn't look to be 80 though, and that's something that throws Arthur off. As Good Stab is out with his hunting crew, just a couple of other men and boys his age, because he's not really old, he's like a teenager or a young boy, they stumble upon this thing in a cage, this man. Quote, "The thing in the cage gasped all at once and sat up fast, pulled itself to the front bars, reaching with its clawed fingers for Peasy, who backed off fast enough that his tail hat fell in front of him, too close to the cage for him to get it back. The thing didn't just have a bloody chin like a sticky mouth either. It had teeth too, not as big as black bears, but not as small as big weasels. These teeth were snapping at Peasy, daring him to come and get that hat. What is it?" Hunts to the side said again, quieter to himself. We had no idea. The thing hissed like a real lion backed into a tree, and in my head, that was the first time that I called him Positopi, the catman, because he acted like one. Now that he was snapping his mouth open and shut, we could see that the catman had those sharp teeth like we'd already seen, but on each side right here he had longer teeth coming down from the front and curled back a little for keeping its prey in place. They shoot at it and find that it doesn't die when they do, so they determined, quote, "Burn him," I said to Peasy and Hunts to the side. "Cut him into many pieces, and then burn him, and then bury him. They'll be weaker without their god." "Bury it where we hunt?" Hunts to the side asked back, insulted. He was right. I hadn't thought about that. "It's a god, and it's white," Peasy finally said, and the way that he said it, we, one by one, heard what he was meaning. It was what I was already telling you about how the great white god would climb Chief Mountain and Chief Mountain would crumble. None of us knew what came after that. Just that it had to happen. But Otter Goes Back had told us kids that when the chief crumbled, it would leave a great hole in the ground, and the Pikunni could rush through there, and no Napequans could follow. Not so long as we left all of their kettles and guns, and even their horses behind. One thing to know about the narration in this is that whenever it says Napequans, it means like white settlers and white people, but specifically white settlers is what that word is meaning. So they talk about what they're going to do with this cat man, and they come up with this ritualistic way of killing it to try to get rid of it, to check on it to make sure that it doesn't come back. So now they are loading that cage up to go because they're not going to bury it where they hunt. At some point, soldiers attack Good Stab and his crew. They release the caged man on the soldiers, and this fight ensues with the narrator going down and feeling the bite of the cat man on his shoulder and thinking about his family and his life as he passes out, prepared to die. I think you know what's coming. When you get bit by a vampire and you're also a POV character, I think we know what's coming. We return to Arthur's perspective, and he is eating, thinking about how many of his parishioners think that they can bribe him for extra forgiveness by giving him especially food but free gifts. But here he is telling them, nah fam. He is enjoying his cake though. He is very much a foodie, always been a foodie. We'll see later that he's even like, I want to go back and I want to finish up this business that we're doing right here so I can go back and eat some pudding. Because he's like always talking about the cake, always talking about drinking stuff, always talking about eating more stuff. It is just, he is a bit of a foodie. Actually, he's always talking about receiving food from parishioners, let's be real. So he's enjoying his cake and saying that he won't eat it too fast, while speaking on how he knows Good Stab is lying about this massacre that he was claiming to be a part of, because some of his details are off. He then describes the murder scenes of many cavalrymen. He then describes a murder scene of many cavalrymen, what it looks like, ideas of what had caused it, knowing that it was Indians behind it from the way that the bodies were left behind, but who started it and why, no one knows. Then it's Easter, which, funny timing, but it's Easter, and Arthur is giving a sermon when Good Stab comes in wearing sunglasses, and he's thinking, quote, he was yet wearing his darkened spectacles against the injurious light, but otherwise he was a spitting image of himself a week prior. He nodded once to me, and then took what was quickly becoming his usual pew, at first lowering his face to his hands to begin the complicated maneuver of peeling out of his darkened spectacles, but then, when the church was once again too bright for his delicate sensibilities, electing to leave them on instead, denying me his accusing, as I take them, eyes. His posture was either that of one ready and willing to worship, or that of one who wanted me to believe as much. Yet, at the same time, I remember how his opening salvo of last Sunday had already ended with his own death. This meant, of course, that I had to choose whether to believe my own eyes, that he was yet here, or believe his story, which assured me that he couldn't be. Yet had he not told me I would, in that time, believe him, that the evidence would mount and mount until I couldn't clamber over it. Back into my rational disbelief. After the service, Goodstab stays back with Arthur to have some tea and eat and keep telling the story of his life, though Arthur is obviously the only one that is actually eating and drinking tea, because Goodstab is a vampire and he can't consume anything that's not blood. But Arthur doesn't know that yet, or doesn't believe that yet. But I guess he technically hasn't told him that he was a vampire yet, because he is just getting to the turning point. Goodstab recounts killing and scalping the soldiers as a young man. He might be a bit clumsy at it, but his dad is proud of him anyway. He talks about killing more people, and then his transformation with the Catman, quote, "But at the same time, I was alive, and running so fast that I couldn't stop. Also, there was a taste in my nose, which I know that you can think means that I was smelling, but it was more than that. I'd never tasted with my nose before, not where every taste turned into a picture of itself. I could tell that the long legs had passed here, and that a real bear was sleeping there, and that a family of dirty faces were living over there in a hole under a thick root. It made me dizzy, and have to shake my head from having to know so much all at once. But all of these tastes weren't what was pulling me ahead. Out of the trees and into the open grass faster and faster, the taste in the air was pulling me ahead was different. It was deeper and wider and more full. It was old meat and tobacco smoke, rum and leather and dried blood, and the picture that it made in my head was a sound, was thunder but deeper, and I screamed with rage to hear it, because I was hearing it again. But I couldn't remember from where. The one time that I stopped, it wasn't from needing to breathe or sleep. It was to shove my nose into some of the grass and snow where there was piss. This was the Badger Creek, close to the buildings that we call Old Agency now, but weren't calling the Ration House yet. I could see its tall part with a window to the east, and I knew that the only reason the one who had made water here hadn't gone over there was because he had passed in the night and hadn't seen it. I breathed the taste in again, to know it better, and then stood up on both legs and screamed again, and had to fall away, because this was the first time that I'd looked straight up with my new eyes. He experiences the sun for the first time as a vampire, where his skin is more sensitive and his eyes are way more sensitive. He kills and feeds for the first time on blood, though he is killing and feeding on animals at first. He ends up sucking down some bone marrow and vomits because he can't stomach anything that is not blood. And I mean anything. Like, he can't eat raw meat, he can't eat fur, he can't eat, obviously, bone marrow. It is just sucking the blood out of things. And he recognizes that he is now something that he wasn't before, and he wonders if it's a punishment for the crimes that he has committed. Quote, "I back away from throwing up, wipe my mouth with my arm, some more of the blackened skin coming off that I had to spit away, and I ran my fingers through my hair, felt for the first time that my hair was gone. Hair burns first in the fire." It was good, told myself, because I would have had to cut it off anyway, to grieve for Tall Dog and Peasy and even Hunts to the side, and for that beaver that I knew now I shouldn't have killed. That's what started all of this. I've heard our elders and many faces men, and even the chiefs say that it's the Napequan who are the ruining the world, but the Napequan are just what happen when we forget we're Pikuni, when we think a many shots gun is more important than beaver medicine. The soldiers ahead of us in the backbone when we were walking up, they probably would have kept marching straight ahead to Chief Mountain and maybe the real old man country if we hadn't kicked into the lodge of sticks in the water. This, what I am now, it's punishment. That's what I'm telling you. I deserve it. There on that rise with my chest and mouth and hands and arms shining with wet blood, I laid my head back on the dead soldier's stomach and stared at that first fire star. Thought that I could hear it hissing in the sky. I didn't have to try to know that I couldn't stand yet. This is how it is after I feed. I have to lay down as flat as I can so that the new blood can move through my body into all of the new pouches. It's like carrying all of the water skins you need, but carrying them inside of you. Something that I think this book does really, really well is like, one, making the vampires very mystical and also grounded in like existing in a way that you could see in reality, but also making it an actual curse. Because a lot of vampires in general, not all, a lot of vampire lore right now can actually really romanticize it. And this in a way really returns it to being a curse and very uncomfortable in a couple of ways. Some of the other things we're going to talk about as we get there, as Good Stab talks about it, as Good Stab discovers it. But it is a curse, and it's very uncomfortable. He finds that he is a danger to himself and his loved ones for what he is and tries to kill himself, because he does believe that he does not have full control over himself, and if he gets too close to his loved ones and he is too hungry, he knows he's not going to be able to control himself, because he's already felt what that hunger feels like, and that drive and that inability to control himself. He tries shoving a blade into his chest. This does not actually kill him, and he ends up healing. All that actually happens is he gets really, really thirsty, he gets really weak, and he can't move, but he knows that he can't drink water because it'll just make him sick. Even the thought of just drinking water makes him sick. He dresses in a fallen soldier's clothing to distance himself from his tribe, and then he goes searching for something. Quote, "There's only one thing that I can drink anymore. It's why I'm here, talking to you. You black robes know about drinking blood, don't you? You make your people in these wooden seats do it every time they're here. In that way, we're the same. But you're still a two-legged, even from drinking all of that blood, not me. What I am now is four-legged, but with a man's memories, as punishment." He seeks refuge from the sun in a cave, is attacked by a bear, consumes the bear in part, and then with a catman, he's eating other animals in the woods to regain his strength that he has lost from trying to kill himself, because he did weaken himself. One thing in this specifically, since we've got that element introduced, is that vampires cannot die. Once you are one of these things, you cannot die. You just continually regenerate. And it does sound a lot like hell, especially when we get to some of the other things that happen as a vampire. He tries to be a part of a beaver clan, but they're keeping their distance away from him no matter how hard he tries, and they avoid any of the resources that he brings them because he has touched them. As he eats animals in the woods, he makes a new discovery about his new system. Quote, "By the end of beginning summer moon, I had felt 2 hard nubs on my head, here and there. I was growing horns like a long leg, like a wags his tail, because that's what I'd been eating. If I ate only sharp backs for long enough to fill me up with their blood over and over, I would grow a quill bustle on my back. I knew if I lived only on silver fish, I would lean over the water and fall in, never to come back up on land. If I ran down a sticky mouth and then all of its brothers and sisters, then I would get those same white stripes on my side, and would never be still, would always be roaming fast and hungry. I thought about this for nearly a whole moon, not feeding at all anymore." So one thing, obviously, that we're learning is that you are what you eat in this. Anything that a vampire consumes too much of, or a catman, but a vampire, he starts becoming that thing, or growing those elements until they become the thing. Now, obviously, he didn't go full whatever he was eating. He just started getting the bumps on his head from where horns were growing, and then he's like, I need to stop this. And this is not the only time this is going to come up. This curse is actually going to be used quite a bit in this story. And also, it's going to be used to make him very angry. Once he's noticed the bumps and he's gotten hungry enough, and he's starting to understand his limitations, or his curses, really, he gets his first taste of human flesh, or human blood. Let me correct myself. Quote, "I had been going to walk in, ask for some of his bitter black water just to get him turning his back to me long enough. But now I just rushed in, jumping with one boot off the rump of his squealing big ears, taking the barrel of his long gun in both of my hands, and biting into the front of his throat with my mouth, so that at first all I got was air that he was trying to breathe. I drank so hard from him that my back hunched up and down like I was being sick, and that's how good it is to feed on the two-legged like I'm supposed to. It's better than cold water from a creek after a long hunt. With enough blood in me, I can see colors in the night, I can taste those colors, and I can hear the roots of the trees reaching one piece of dirt deeper in. I knew not to drink the big ears, because I didn't want big ears." For a little while, he becomes more or less a slave to his hunger. There's not much going on, but he is chasing that hunger and feeding until one day he eats a child, and he is crying that he can't stop himself from consuming. And also the tears in this, when you're a vampire, they're blood tears. That's a constant thing in this. When the Pikuni boy is empty, and it is a Pikuni boy that he kills, so somebody from his own tribe, He runs away in sorrow and anger and stumbles into just a bunch of dead buffalo all over the place. They are shot pointlessly, laying on the ground. They have been skinned, and then the babies have been just kind of left there without parents because there's not enough of them, like the resources on them to make them worth the ammo that they would cost to kill. And as he is inspecting the buffalo, he too is shot. This is where he says the story is meant to stop for the day. So we switch. He's done talking for the bit, and we go back to Arthur, who is reinterpreting everything Goodstab said as Goodstab being insane and delusional, and he fears that he may be convinced to believe Goodstab, even though he is cognizantly like, this guy is crazy, I need to not believe him, but it would be so easy to believe him if I'm not careful. Quote, he told me that I would believe, however, did he not? That I am even logging these fantastic elements is perhaps the first step down that dark path. The savage mind is more rhetorically capable than I would have given it credit for. The pastor believes that everything Goodstab is presenting is just to trick him into a delusion, including Goodstab not eating the food that he was given when he was visiting. Because he obviously has now said that he can't eat anything other than blood, so obviously he's not going to accept any of the offerings that Arthur gives him. Arthur is just beside himself on what to do with this crazy man, and while also talking about his own overconsumption. Arthur is then in a mirror looking over his own teeth, especially because at church in the darkness, Goodstab was able to identify that Arthur was wearing fake teeth. Quote, I admit here to studying my teeth in my shaving mirror this morning. In order to do so, I had to work a stubborn shutter open to get enough sunlight in, and then try various angles in order to see into my mouth to judge the quality and the color. Before Goodstab's comment about his teeth compared to mine, I'd never once given thought to mine own ivory, as it were. He's not wrong, though. Even in the darkness of the chapel, with one candle flickering, the pools of inky blackness he calls his eyes were able to adjudge the yolky varnish that I must present wheresoever I go. And that's the better teeth, the show teeth. The remaining ones are best undescribed. Oh, vanity, thy name is Arthur Beaucarn, evidently. A decrepit narcissus holding his lanky old frame in the posture of a question mark in the small window of his own church to better study his own appearance, at least until the wax holding him together should soften and his limbs begin to sag, then fall to the floor. Arthur takes this as another attempt for Goodstab to undermine, confuse, and attack him because he is pointing out things that shouldn't be obvious that also are personal weaknesses, obviously getting Arthur into his own head. He declares that Goodstab has labeled him as the enemy, and that's why he's making these comments, and that's why he's coming to visit, because he's got something against Arthur. So he wants Arthur to crack to something. He doesn't know what yet or why. Like, he doesn't know why Goodstab might be angry at him or what kind of revenge he has come for, but he does think that Goodstab specifically wants to ruin him now. He receives bacon from the local butcher and asks if there are any Blackfeet that may be around. There is a camp just outside of Miles City, which is where he goes, using the bacon to talk to one of the Indians there. This guy's name is Amos. From here, he also receives a cat that he names Cordelia. Eventually, the Indian asks about the full blood that he saw coming and going from the church, because Goodstab actually has like 3 different names. It's like he who takes no scalps, Full Blood, and then Goodstab. So Amos, the Indian from here, asks if the pastor saw him, and the pastor knows that he is talking about Goodstab. Amos says that he had heard the man was already dead, and so is kind of like, Before the conversation can go on much longer, a new face appears. Amos kind of runs off to go and hide, and this new man that has shown up is actually a Pinkerton named Dove, who has come from San Francisco looking for a missing family. Arthur talks to the Pinkerton enough to know that Dove is looking for Goodstab because he gives this description of this Indian that is 100% Goodstab. However, he doesn't tell Dove about Goodstab. Dove is also asking if he knows anything by virtue of his being a pastor who deals in confessions, and if he does confessions, because he's like, don't you? I'm pretty sure that you do, but don't you? So you should know things. And he's like, look, I am sworn to the cloth. I am sworn to secrecy. I can't tell you anything. I don't know anything anyway. Still, Arthur gets away without saying anything to Dove, and he returns to church. After the sermon, he meets with Goodstab as always, and they go back and forth with Arthur looking for Goodstab's fangs, and then Goodstab says that he will continue with his story while touching the shoulder that had been shot that long time ago when he was hanging over the little buffaloes because, as obviously as he recalls it, the pain comes. Good Stab, wounded by being shot, is desperate and feeling himself going unconscious. He drinks from the buffalo he is standing over, eats it totally, and falls asleep inside of its carcass. When he wakes up, he is healed, and he explores, seeing all of these dead buffalo skinned. The only ones spared are the calves, as they're crying out in need, and he takes pity on them and tries to care for them. The buffalo calves also trust him because he is wearing some of the insides of the buffalo that he slept in. They then follow him as he finds a nearby Napequan camp, and a fight ensues as he seeks vengeance for the Picani and all of the dead buffalo. The small group of settlers kills a bunch of the buffalo calves. Good Stab murders almost all of these settlers, feeds on them, and then flees, thinking, quote, "What I am is the Indian who can't die. I am the worst dream America ever had." Away from the Napequan camp, he holds a small white calf that was still alive. He didn't want to leave it behind to be slaughtered by the settlers or the settlers' friends or whoever came next. And then it's end of the day. Returning to Arthur's perspective, a township drama is happening. A horse was shot, pistol emptied into it by the sheriff. Something sussy is going on. And oh yeah, the Pinkerton dove, he was found dead, mangled in the train tracks a mile outside of town. So someone obviously got to him, and everyone is scared. Packages aren't being delivered. Everybody is so scared, not leaving their houses, not really doing anything. Even the church is closed. And maybe you would think Arthur would make some kind of comment with like, this is probably Good Stab, especially considering he just heard about Good Stab murdering a bunch of people, and he just heard that Dove was looking for Good Stab. Now, I'm not entirely sure why Arthur doesn't specifically make comment about Good Stab at this point, and that's one of the weird things about the way that this book is written. So I loved the book We Need to Talk About Kevin, but that book was written as a series of letters to her husband after everything had happened, though you don't really know he's not receiving the letters until the end of the book, sorry. But they're still written as a series of letters of Eva going over the course of their entire life to try to figure out why what happened. And that worked so well. There was so much character for Eva, and you got to see her life escalating. You got to see things escalating, her interacting, and you also got to see her interacting with Kevin. Like, those scenes with Kevin were so intense. And the scenes where you got to actually, she described also what was happening with her and her husband, Franklin, and when Kevin was born. Like, the character interactions in those were so good, and it was all in writing. With this, it feels like we get a reveal in a previous chapter, and it's obviously Arthur is writing down what he is being told, but then with it being a journal, he doesn't even respond. It doesn't make connections. He doesn't think about what he is hearing. It kind of just, and now it's the next day, and we're doing something else. And so sometimes, especially, and we're going to see it also when we're back in Betsy's perspective, it just feels like there are parts that are there, but they're talking past each other. They're not actually listening or responding to one another, which gives this feeling of not only these characters being distant, but also being tools. Because you would think that, okay, I'm interacting with this person. I was just told that he's killed a bunch of people. I was just told that he's got, a lot of aggression towards Napequan, and I'm a Napequan, and he has acted this way. I mean, related to the Napequan. He's not necessarily a settler, but I mean, he also knows that he has a past where he was part of the cavalry. Like, he knows that. Arthur does. Arthur knows that he was part of the cavalry. Arthur knows where he has been. And by not thinking about it and not connecting it, one feels like hiding things from the reader specifically so they can't put together where this is going to go or why Good Stab might be here, but it also doesn't make any sense for the progression of the story. It's just specifically ignoring important context and responding to things that should be responded, oh, everybody is so uncomfortable and scared, and there's a Pinkerton here, and the Pinkerton described this guy that murdered people in San Francisco. That sounds an awful lot like the guy that keeps visiting me here, and he says absolutely nothing about it. And perhaps enough, you can be well, maybe he's avoiding discussing this because he's I don't think so, but this is his journal. He could very well be look, I'm not going to become superstitious. Indians all look alike. He could do so many different things to cope and then just move on. And that would be enough to throw it off. But to make like zero comment on any of it and just ignore it like it never existed is we get these like huge drops of drastic information and zero response. And it's something that even when it's not written as letters, when you've got like drastic experiences happening in a story, the thing that gives it power is by characters responding to the circumstances. Like if you've ever read a book and then you're like supposed to be scared of somebody, but then all of the main characters especially are like, I'm not scared of your power. And then they like have no skills and then they beat them anyway. You're like, this isn't really scary because even the characters in these situations don't respect this hierarchy of power, be it a physical power or a structured power or anything like that. Like your characters have to believe in their own circumstances. And so when Arthur doesn't respond to any of this with it having any danger whatsoever, it weakens the feeling of there being any danger at all. And it also gives all of these characters, because Goodstab does it, Betsy does it, and Arthur does it, where it's so distant from the circumstances that they read flat, that they read like they don't have a personality. And then they start sharing the same lingo. And we're talking like 1912 versus 2012. And Betsy literally starts sharing the same words as some of them were using that you're like, where did that even come from? We'll get there. Now, as I said, I could accept his ignorance or his arrogance as some form of denial, as he shortly then goes on to rejecting any sounds around the church as being anything suspicious, telling himself that if there was any sussiness afoot, then surely his cat would tell him about it. And why did Goodstab choose him to tell his tale to? Doesn't he have any good godly men in his tribe to speak to? Some of this is just Arthur's frustration and desire to reject the obvious danger that he's in, but he's also still welcoming Goodstab into his church by shuttering the curtains. And again, this is something that it's like he should be reflecting on the part that he played with the Pecuni men, because he knows that he has interacted with tribesmen before. He knows that he was part of a slaughter. Spoiler alert, we're going to get there, but he knows that he was part of slaughtering an entire tribe and stood around for it. And he's not even like sitting here in his journal being like, please God, I hope that this is not vengeance, because I know that the God of the Old Testament is vengeful. And like, I was doing what I believed was the Lord's work. I was doing what you told me to do. Like, tell yourself the same lies that you told the soldier, because the letter that's in that final section of this book that Betsy finds feels like such garbage that it's thrown out at the last second. Like, he wrote that letter, which we're going to get to sort of discussing, because I didn't put the quotes in here to like go through the whole letter. But he put that letter in that book and shows no sign of feeling those emotions of guilt or reflection on what he did through the entirety of his interactions with Goodstab. And he acts like he has no idea why Goodstab would be there, or anything to do with knowing that he's a Pecuni. Like, at some point, perhaps Arthur should have said something about having met Pecuni before, or being surprised, or being scared because of what his preconceived conceptions are, even if the Pecuni were known to be peaceful people, because he's afraid of the consequences coming to his door that he may or may not have tried to use the church to shield himself from. Like, those are choices that could have been made to sort of give an idea of where this is going, rather than just try to make it a hard left turn into surprise at the end. And you'll see what I mean, and you can tell me what you think about like all of that. But we've got none of that. He's just like ignoring everything and pretending to be completely ignorant of everything. Still, in Arthur's perspective, another person is found dead. Arthur finds a ventilation door in the ceiling of his church that would be big enough for a man to get through if they were the size of Goodstab. And now he wonders if Goodstab is sneaking in after he leaves. And now Arthur is wondering if Goodstab is putting on a show of leaving the church only to sneak in through the roof to like watch him as a cat would watch its prey, to mess with its prey just before, going in for the kill, because fun. He then goes to Dove's hotel room and pays for access to get in to kind of go through Dove's belongings that were left behind. He also uses the fact that he's a pastor to be like, I'm collecting these for the family, for the service, and also gives the guy that he pays the Pinkerton's bowler hat because the guy is like, great. He gives a sermon, and after which everyone is left, Goodstab appears again, asking some personal questions about the pastor, sits down with him to share more of his personal story. So Goodstab returns the young boy to the tribe after having scaring him accidentally. He finds himself a trapper who he talks to for a bit and learns that if he eats too many white men, then he will also take on the attributes of a white man. So it's not just the animals' attributes that he's going to pick up, it's the people. So the more that he kills white people, the more he's going to become a white person. Well, the more he kills and drinks white people, the less picoony he's going to be. He also fears that he will one day wake up and find himself so hungry that he will go crazy berserk and end up eating his entire family, which is one of the reasons why he keeps himself away from the Picooney tribe. He's like, I can't go home. I don't want to accidentally kill my people. And again, this adds to that feeling of this curse, this carrying something bad that weighs on his shoulders, because he doesn't feel like he has any control over, well, a lot of control. He can control himself somewhat, but he doesn't have full control, and he doesn't know when he'll lose control, and he worries about the loss of his family. He attacks some people, runs away as he is attacked back, spends a couple nights inside of an animal carcass as he recovers again. He finds more hide hunters, whom he stalks back to a camp, watches them rape a young boy before brutally killing all of them. He then wants to consume them, but stops himself because he doesn't want to take on their features since he is a Picooney man. So he kills a bunch of these skinners, takes his own damage, runs away after burying some of them into the ground. He is starving, so starving that he is worried about waking up and having eaten his own again. He then stumbles upon a camp of his tribe, and he wants to go to them. He wants to be with them, but he doesn't, because obviously he fears. He also sees a tent very far back from them and knows that that is a death tent where people are put when they're slowing everybody down because they're going to die soon and they're being kept away from everybody else and basically being given a place to stay until they pass. And so he's like, okay, they should be safe to eat. So he goes in there, and there is an old woman inside. And he knows this old woman because she is like the mother or the grandmother of somebody who was a friend of his who had actually died in the massacre or in the fight when the Catman had been released and when he had been bitten, because everybody that he went out with that day when he was bitten had died. And he would have too if the Catman hadn't bit him. When they're done speaking, he decides to drain her of her blood because she isn't going to make it until morning anyway. This is going to be her last night anyway, and so he doesn't feel guilt, but there really wasn't enough blood in her to fill him. When he is leaving the tent, the camp actually sees him and invites him over, welcoming him back and taking him in because they haven't seen him since he went out hunting with that cohort. And everybody died, and they thought he had died, but they hadn't found his bones or his body. And so they were like, where is Goodstab? His father is then like, why don't you just come and smoke a pipe with me and we talk? And as they smoke, Goodstab begins to die because of what he is. He can't even consume smoke. He can't even consume nicotine. He can't do any of that. And his father stabs him with a broken pipe because his father recognizes that something is wrong with him. He is not who he should be. And so then once he is stabbed and weak, his father picks him up and takes him to a trapper named Nappy. And Goodstab doesn't believe that this man is a full trapper. He's something else. The trapper is like, what have you done to yourself? Arthur is now interacting with a superstitious woman in town named Frida and is questioning his own coverings of Goodstab's story, deciding that it is not a tale because tales actually have morals to them. What this is a dark gospel. And he will mark the journal entries of Goodstab's stories with the phrase, the Nachzehrs Dark Gospel. His own chapters are marked with the header, the absolution of a 3 persons or something like that. Arthur then believes that Goodstab is going to come after him, so he tells Sheriff Doyle, but Sheriff Doyle doesn't seem too interested in helping at all, so he's pretty much on his own. Arthur is then getting more paranoid. His cat isn't even helping him. His cat isn't around anymore at this point, and he leaves the church to make a deal with someone else and sees another Pinkerton coming into town to talk to the sheriff. He points him out to the grassland where he knows Goodstab is hanging out, and he is pretty sure that Goodstab is going to take down that Pinkerton as he did previously, but doesn't say anything. He briefly talks to the sheriff and is taken back to Amos Shortribs, the Indian from earlier that had gotten the bacon, and informs him about Goodstab. Amos wants to know more before finally sharing, quote, yes, that feather, it reminded him of someone from the before days. It was a renowned medicine man named Happy, who had gone to the mountains for his vision and had one unlike any other. As with all things Indian, it came in 4s. First, the morning star appeared with the spirit buffalo. Next, this morning star placed his hand in the fire without injury. Third, sad for the fate of his people, what had happened and what would happen, the fabled morning star cried blood at one end, which is where he got his name among the Blackfeet, the full blood, as in, he was so full of blood it had spilled out of him. Fourth, he burned the backbone and his spirit buffalo both, but walked through the fire for the boy who would become happy, and flew with him back to camp, leaving a single raven feather to assure Happy that he would never be alone in the world. When Amos Shortribs was done and nodding off over the bottle, I said to him, "This full-blood Blackfeet. He takes no scalps, does he?" Amos Shortribs looked up at me, his eyes watery and unfocused. "Two different people," he said obviously. One a divinity, and the other a monster. I didn't correct him. I actually like this because it presented a lot of nuance between the two sides of the situation, and it was believable to me within the circumstances. It also showed him as Goodstab didn't see himself as a good guy and didn't see himself as a non-monster, and he also had believable angst and believable anger towards the people around him that he felt was terrorizing his people, and that in many cases were terrorizing his people. And so I felt like this wasn't super one-sided, but we're going to get that Betsy's perspective entirely is to pick a side, which irritates the crap out of me, but we'll get there. At the church, Goodstab is back talking to Arthur, and the pastor is now hinting at his belief in Goodstab's story, while they then challenge each other's beliefs. Quote, "Does the secular nature of this spiritual awakening say anything about the validity of what you call your religion?" I asked, fully expecting this to be the thing that killed me. It would have been a good death for a man of the cloth. "Does the absence of your savior tell you anything about yours?" Goodstab asked back, however, either unfamiliar with the term secular or dismissing it entirely. "Is he not insulted if his head now sits at the bottom of a trough out there in the street? Like Lavinius Clarkson's flag?" I added dourly. "Was it only his?" Goodstab asked back. "I thought that it was a blanket for all you Americans to hide under. One that you would rip away," I muttered, swallowing to be bold. "It flew above the bear the day that they killed Heavy Runner," Goodstab said, back without pause. "It flies above every camp of dead Indians. I will always pull them down. You put your reminder of pain on the wall and pray to them. We still hurt, so we don't need that reminder." "Why are you here?" I asked then. "Why me? Can you do me that dignity at least? Do you deserve my attention, three persons?" Goodstab said, more than asked, if I'm honest. "Do you really wish to be absolved?" I said back with the same intonation, or lack thereof. "Do you?" he said to me. He also asks about Goodstab's past, his guilt that he carries, how he raised the buffalo to be his pack, but that he couldn't do the same with horses because the horses feared him. And even raising them from young, he still couldn't live with himself if they were to hurt him or he was to hurt them if the horse ever got scared of him and then it made him upset out of anger of being hurt. Quote, "How do you live with having drunk that old woman?" I asked weakly. He nodded that this was the crux, yes. "She's not the only one," he said, as if punishing himself for the confession. Not the only old Blackfeet?" I asked. "If you ask why I hate myself," he said, "I'll tell you it's because, by taking the lives of the elders, I'm stealing wisdom from the Picuni. They're the only ones who remember the old days and the old way. Them and you," I said. "The people might listen to the full blood," he said, "were he ever to walk down from the backbone, but they would never listen to Takes No Scalps." "What about Goodstab?" I asked. "Would they listen to him?" "They don't remember him," Goodstab says. "I wouldn't either. His life was thrown away. He didn't matter at all to anyone. He couldn't even protect his wives and children. It's good that Beaver Chief made him cry red," I added. Then they agree for Goodstab to continue telling his story. Nappy the Notch Trapper helps him survive, and he does more killings of settlers, just a lot of them. Eats some more Indians, feels bad, but he doesn't want to become a non-Indian, and he isn't ready to kill himself yet by becoming an animal. He eats some more non-Indians to see what traits he takes on, experimenting here and there to see how much he can stand, but mostly he just keeps going back and forth between killing white people, eating Indians, feeling bad, and circling around that for a while. Oh, and also the first time that he attacked an Indian in a cabin, he gets caught and trampled and beaten and destroyed, his ear cut off with a tomahawk. They run him over with a horse. They cut his head off. They set him on fire. They're like, is he good? He should be down forever. Goodbye. They obviously think that he's dead, but he is not. Arthur is then believing that Goodstab is what he claims to be, even if it makes absolutely no sense to the natural order of God that he believes in. Arthur also believes that Goodstab's visits and stories are aimed at him to say or do something that is specific, and Goodstab will keep coming until he gets the confession that he wants to get. So maybe now he is starting to get this idea that Goodstab is coming for something. And again, now that I know the ending of this, it feels like it is hiding that specific information, because I don't think that freaking dude here would be this ignorant of like what Goodstab might have against him. He should probably be getting scared and writing in his little journal, "Oh God, please save me. Oh God, forgiveness, please." Like, oh no, why hath you forsaken me? Like, he should be on the knees begging at this point, because he knows. Oh, he knows for sure. Rather than confessing to anything and playing into Goodstab's hand, though, Arthur requests that perhaps his fleeing of Miles City would appease Goodstab, so he is going to disappear himself and hope that Goodstab leaves the town alone, which I don't want to break it to him or anything, but like, considering the history that Goodstab has given you, do you really think that running away is going to be good enough for this man? Do you really think that he is not going to find every single one of your connections in this town and murder them and then come and find you? Because, bruh, you're not getting away. Like, you cannot run from this. You cannot run from what you've done. That's pretty much what Goodstab is proving, even just by showing up. Because I don't know how many years this is after the Marius massacre. The Marius massacre. I can't remember. But he cannot possibly think. I mean, he does. I say he can't possibly. But this is just a coward. And a coward's way out. And he's not even begging God for assistance in escaping the wrath of this man. Arthur flees the church, but then comes back because he forgot his journal, and he doesn't feel like he has anybody to talk to, obviously, because he left, and he's like, well, God has also forsaken me, and I need somebody to talk to, and all I have is this journal. So he's back at church. Goodstab finds him from the large fire that he lit and his personal smell, and after they talk, Goodstab turns Arthur into a vampire to torture him more, to make him carry the same curse that causes Goodstab to walk alone, that causes Goodstab to have to stay away from his tribe and his family. But the torture and revenge isn't over yet. Not only that, but Goodstab is waiting in the church with all of these dead people from town, the entire Flowers family, which is who he is related to, by the way. He's got a different name as a Bocarn, but the Flowers are related to him, we are going to find out. And I didn't put the Flowers' names in here because you don't get that reveal until way later, because the Flowers really don't show up all that often, and they only show up to be like dead here and then mentioned at the end. But he kills like a bunch of people that are related to Arthur and then lines them up in the pews and like puts Arthur up on a crucifix on the stage, it sounds like, from the descriptions of things, and is talking to Arthur and lecturing Arthur. Also, some long descriptions of like the way that all of these bodies, all of these people were tortured. We also have Arthur discovering that Goodstab replaced the 3 missing toes that he has with toes from some of these people, because he just like cut off other people's toes and then connected them to his feet. He also torments Arthur until Arthur admits that he was part of a group of soldiers who killed a bunch of Blackfeet in the cabins back at the Marius massacre, which will be mentioned again later. Arthur breaks out saying that he didn't do it, the soldiers did it. It was their order, and that they were there to make a country. And that there's a bit here where it more or less says that Goodstab doesn't see the white people as anything worth caring about, in the same way that Arthur and his folks saw nothing of value being lost when they killed Indians. So the original Catman and Goodstab now fight each other. Goodstab, even though he's got Arthur at his disposal at the moment, and obviously Arthur is now a vampire, the torture is not over yet. This is a vengeance story. So now that he's got Arthur admitting to this thing, the things are not over yet. The story that he has to tell is not over yet. The things that he wants Arthur to carry are not over yet. So with him where he is at, he is going to tell more of his background. So we've got, before all of this happened, going further back, Arthur and Catman are interacting with each other. The original Catman to Goodstab, that turned Goodstab. They're fighting each other because Goodstab hates Catman, and Catman won't tell him how to kill their kind because Goodstab doesn't want to live. Goodstab feels cursed. Goodstab doesn't want to harm anybody that he loves, be the end of anybody that he loves, but there is like nothing that they can do to kill them. They can just get hungry and then sit there until something crawls across them, and then their hunger is going to be like until they get enough strength to like go find something else, and then find something else. So like their hunger will drive them if they get hungry enough. And so they got to take care of themselves or they're going to just go berserk on whatever comes near. Goodstab is so far removed now from his tribe and he can't do any of the rituals of his tribe. He can't even dream like a Pikuni. Like he can't do any smoking. He literally cannot be part of the Pikuni tribe in any way. And his curse is literally just being alive and being forced to be alive and not being able to participate in anything as a human, as a community, as nothing. At this point, Catman traps Goodstab and provides him with people to eat. So like he is trapped down. This is the only thing that you can do is you can force feed them something to turn them into something else. And what Catman does after Goodstab is contained is that he keeps feeding him white people until he no longer looks like a Pikuni. And the only way that he ends up learning this is that he is talking about not wanting to attack Pikuni with somebody else. And they're like, why the frick do you care about Indians? And that's when he realizes that he does not look like an Indian anymore. And that's because he has eaten so many people that are not Indians. And he gets so mad that Catman has done this to him. Obviously, like he's like, I have to walk this earth, not being able to participate with my tribe at all. But now I don't even look like me. I don't even look anything like the people that I love, the people that I am with, but I look like somebody that I hate. So obviously, Goodstab is like, freaking Catman, I am going to get my vengeance on you too, buddy. I'm coming for you. The fighting with Catman goes back and forth then for a while, with Goodstab wanting nothing more than to kill Catman. Catman kills more of Goodstab's tribe. Eventually, Goodstab does beat Catman, but obviously, since he can't kill a vampire, he's got to do something else. So Goodstab beats Catman until he can't move. Then for a while, he only feeds him fish until he is so much a fish that all he can do is that he has become a fish. And then he throws him into the water where obviously as a fish, you're only ever going to eat fish again. So this bastard Catman, for lack of better words, gets to live the rest of his life as a fish with human memories who is never going to stop being a fish. Very quite likely. And that is how he pretty much kills the Catman. Like that's the best that you can do because they're immortal. So you've got like this 500-year-old vampire fish in the ocean, 600 now, I guess, in 2012. It's also at this point that Goodstab learns that he can tame horses by infecting them with his blood. And he learns that this is how you can tame other animals as well. Like you bleed on them a little bit or they kind of get it. I think they got it in the horse's eyes. And then the horse was just like listening to him. So we're going to see him use this on other creatures, specifically a cat. It also kind of makes him a little bit vampiric themselves. He finishes his story with, quote, I was back where Tall Dog and Peasy and Hunts to the Side had died, where I had died too. I reined us around through the taller trees on the other side, and when I came back, I had so many big sticks as I could hold up on my lap, good ones I had broken off from high up on trees, from the backs of the horse. I left them stacked on the top of the snow for Beaver Chief, and then I turned, taking us uphill again. It felt good for the horse's hooves to go through the snow on the ground. It made it like I was a person again. We went higher and higher, colder and colder, the ice frozen on my face and in the horse's mane and tail, and then the chief mountain was there between gusts of white, so close and huge that we stopped, had to suck our breaths in. It always had been there, but each time it's new again. I held my hand up, but my face was down, because behind me was a whole camp of the dead, their throats red and open, but I was home at last. This is where my confession is over, three-person. I leave you now with your dead. Now we get all of this, okay? And you're like, wow, whoa, look at what we just went through with Goodstab's life, with Goodstab's confessions, with the kind of things that Goodstab is sharing that he's been through, that what he did, in which case he just killed a vampire. Like the only way that you can kill a vampire, he just did this to his creator, and you're not going to comment on that at all. Instead, bro is out here journaling about his cat as fast as possible, where she might be, and the fact that she doesn't like other people touching her. There's no response whatsoever to what Goodstab just told him, or how he was left, or what happened to his family. And this is why I was talking about it feels like they're going like this, because these characters are interacting. Like, Arthur wrote this stuff as Goodstab was telling him. That's theoretically what the setup is we only have Goodstab's testimony, because Arthur was writing it. And then Arthur says absolutely nothing in response to hearing all of this stuff. He's just writing completely different things. He's not like, oh my gosh, look at what I am, look at my family, look at what has happened because of what I have done. Like, there is nothing here. So Arthur is left to live his new life, and he doesn't like it. Not everyone in town is dead. Amos Short Ribs is coming around more, and he's pretty sure it's to torment him, like all of the Blackfeet, because he's like, all Blackfeet are bad, all Blackfeet hate me, all Blackfeet hate white people, whatever. They can't assimilate fast enough, according to Arthur. He's kind of going crazy now, kind of cursed, like all of the eggs that he tries to use for service are rotten, so he's not running away anymore like he was before, because Goodstab already found him, whatever. He's distracted, and then it's like he sees a ghost of the dead, especially his sons, especially his family that had all been placed in the pews and deformed and destroyed and tortured when Goodstab had last come around, but also a bunch of Blackfeet that he recognized from the massacre, people that were part of Goodstab's family, and he apologizes before running out of the church again. He takes his journal and hides it where it will never be found, especially not by the visitors who he doesn't want to come. He's just hiding his journal from freaking Goodstab, which is like, Goodstab knew that you were writing this stuff down. Why do you think that... Now that I think about it, it's like, so Goodstab came for this. I'm assuming, I guess, that he was writing this stuff in secret from Goodstab, but then, like, how did he get it so accurate that he remembered it as picture perfect, as it was described the way that it was? Because the Goodstab chapters were actually written closer to, like, the way that Goodstab wrote, and not, like, a reinterpretation of Arthur writing Goodstab. So it's really weird, and if Goodstab didn't want him to write the journal, and there was really nothing condemning anything in the journal where there should have been, like, his pronunciations of what he did, of his own guilt, of his own coping the entire time, of like trying to trick Goodstab into going away and like praying that he would go away and that God would be on his side or something. Like, there could be something in there. And he was writing this journal the whole time and then shoves it somewhere where he thinks it'll never be found. If he really didn't want it to be found, he could have burned it, but he didn't do that. So he definitely wanted somebody to find it. He just didn't want Goodstab to find it, but who he wanted to find it, I don't freaking know, because like his entire family is dead. So what did he think was going to happen? I don't know. We don't get any closure on that. I've got so many questions regarding that at this point. Now we return to 2013 with Betsy, who is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Arthur Beaucarn. She is the one who is inheriting this found manuscript, this found journal, and it's been like 6 months after opening that first book when it was first found. Now, something to know about this is that Betsy's portions are also written in journal entries, where I think that they should have been written in real time, because them being written as journal entries really doesn't make sense to me for the way that they are written, and it actually weakens the tension, and it makes this entire section really kooky. So like if it opened as real time, and then all of the journal entries were her reading the journal, and then it closed in real time, like first person present tense instead of first person past tense, with it specifically saying that she was typing on a computer, then it would make more sense. But we get stuff in here where she's like thinking in real time, but she's typing as she's thinking, and there's crazy stuff happening around her, and she's like doing voice memos as crazy stuff is happening, when I think that it literally should have just been her being in real time, dealing with the after effects of discovering what her lineage has done, and then having to deal with the revenge plot that's still following him and his family 100 years later. Like, you'll see what I mean, and you can tell me if I'm just crazy and thinking that this is a really weird choice that this author made. Anyway, after closing the book, after reading these pages about Arthur Beaucarn, Betsy is immediately judging her great-great-great-grandfather as a not-so-great-grandfather, which, I mean, can we say that he at least tried to do something better? I have no idea. We really didn't get a sense of, like, whether he was actually repenting or if he was hiding in the church. And this again starts highlighting how these characters are not actual characters. I don't think they're treated like people. They're literally just tools in this revenge plot. And we're going to get more of that as Betsy's perspective comes in, because Betsy's perspective to me is the one that is trying to show this is the definitive opinion. This is what the story is. Don't think that Arthur and Goodstab are equals, are both monsters, where Amos Shortrib had actually been like, look, part of that is a monster, part of that is not a monster. And even Goodstab had been like, I am a monster. Betsy is the one to be like, no, this is not an even story. So she immediately thinks that he sucks, and she's immediately taking on the guilt of his actions, even though she had no idea she was related to this guy until literally the last 6 months as she was reading this book, and somehow she is guilty of carrying all of his guilt of anything that he did while he was alive 100 years ago. I definitely absolutely love moral absolutism and a lack of actual nuance where everybody is just like, when everybody actually sucks or has done sucky things, but now you're absolving some people of what they've done and other people not because whatever. She says that she is not going to get a book deal now, doesn't really have time, and she's just such a huge disappointment. And she's like, I don't have a job. I don't have a future. This book is not going to turn into anything. And nobody takes me seriously. But also, obviously, I don't think she wants this book or information to be out anyway and connected to her. I don't know why. Again, you didn't do anything. It talks about a mistranslation that happened forever ago, that Bogey had been translated into flowers, and it shouldn't have been Beaucarne, and that's where the author's kids came from and why the whole Flowers family at the church. And then she is having a brief meltdown of being a 42-year-old loser with no prospects, no job, no lineage, no husband, no nothing, just a cat named Taz. And she's like, I don't know, maybe Good Stab is still out there and he is haunting the prairie, or he is haunting me. And like, obviously that's not, I can't even call it foreshadowing because it immediately comes after that. So shortly after she says this, her dad's dead because this entire time he's actually been obviously in the hospital. She mentioned that way forever ago that she got this journal because it was supposed to go to her dad, but her dad was sick and in the hospital. So she got all of his belongings. But now she's got what was left of his belongings, which are a singular box of very, very few things of just whatever the 77-year-old had. And she gets a call from Lydia Ackerman, the woman who had found the journal or was copying the journal for her. And she says that police have gotten involved to investigate the journal because the leather of the journal is actually made of human skin. Why is this? I don't know, because the journal was being used as he was still a pastor. Like, we're not going to get any closure on this either. And now it just feels like it's trying to be like extra spooky. Like, isn't that uncomfortable? This guy had a human skin journal. Okay, but did Arthur know it was human skin? Who gave it to him to write in? Because I don't think that Arthur did that himself. We have no reason to believe that he did. And this is such a random element to throw in here because it doesn't turn into anything. It's like, oh, the police are getting involved, BT dubs, because of this. But like, the police don't show up at her house. The police don't get involved with the rest of this story anywhere. And so I don't know where this is coming from or why it is here other than shock factor. The thing is that it also assumes that it was made of Benjamin Flowers' skin, Arthur's son. And would you say that that came after Good Stab killed all of the Flowers in Miles City? And if so, then he started writing this journal. Either he started writing it over or he only started writing it after all of this stuff went down, but before Good Stab killed him the way that you kill a vampire. So like, what? Okay, anybody who has theories on this? Because I don't understand. Now she opens the Bible from her dad's belongings and finds a letter from her mom to her father that her dad had tucked away. She also finds a letter in there with no postmark and no stamp, and that letter is for her from someone who has been standing over her father's deathbed. And I'm thinking that this is the letter that she then reads when she gets to the Blackfeet Reservation that she is going to go to here soon. Her cat has also disappeared and she is upset, bawling her eyes out. She's upset even though she's got her hands on the journal and she knows about her own lineage. Quote, oh, she's also upset that she ever got her hands on that journal and learned about her lineage because she feels so much guilt for where her great-great-great-grandfather came from. Quote, why couldn't that construction worker have just crumbled that journal when he first touched it, before he even knew what he was touching? Then maybe I'd do something actually on track to bolster my tenure portfolio. Then I don't have to know what blood is in my veins. That massacre can just stay in the past where it belongs. That personage is going to be a battered woman's shelter now, I read. Good for it. Good for those women. Good for Miles City, for all of Montana and its hard-handed men and their oh-so-fragile egos. This feels so out of nowhere, and we don't really know anything about Betsy other than she thinks that she is a failure, and like maybe she would be upset because she's super stressed out, but now we're just throwing random things in here, and I still have questions about this human skin freaking book journal that Pastor was writing in the entire time. What are we doing here? Is that just for the freak factor? I mean, yeah. So this is just actually starting to give me Paul Tremblay vibes because I only read Head Full of Ghosts, and that was enough for me to be like, Paul Tremblay? Paul no read Got him. But he bookended that with a blogger's perspective, that it was literally just used to tell you how to read into things and to also, what felt like to me, be a self-insert for political browbeating. And that's what Betsy feels like, honestly. So she believes that she is starting to go loopy from all of the Benadryl, because she has a negative effect from Benadryl and just keeps downing it, and grief. And she also thinks that she sees Good Stab sitting at her computer writing on it, buffalo head and all, because he is wearing a buffalo head. She calls the police about something getting into her house, and she is certain that whoever it was left gloves at her computer, which means that they'll be coming back. And at some point, she decides that she does believe in the full contents of Arthur's journal, and in the same way that Arthur eventually believed what Good Stab had to say. Good Stab then appears, buffalo head and all, with Betsy's missing cat and taunts her with it. He also has brought with him a large-sized prairie dog. It's much larger than normal, and he says that it is Arthur, because he kept Arthur locked in a dungeon and only fed him prairie dogs until finally Arthur became a prairie dog, and then still only just kept feeding him prairie dogs. And it's a very uncanny version of a prairie dog that's kind of much larger for its size and got a little bit of physiology that's weird, but it is a prairie dog. He leaves both the prairie dog and the cat there. The cat has also been fed vampire blood, so it is now a vampire cat, and the both of them want to drink Betsy's blood. And Betsy is just there being tormented by the both of them, who want to drink her blood and can't stop looking at her. And that one is a person dressed as a prairie dog, and the cat is just hungry. The prairie dog is scratching at the doors, making a bunch of noise. The cat is pooping all over the place, no longer using the litter box as they're supposed to. And she writes on her computer while all of this is happening. Again, making it very strange. Like, she's got all of this dramatic stuff going on around her, and she's just typing away, able to focus enough, I guess, to get it all down. And the feeling of these chapters is so much like, I am so freaked out right now. Like, I am so freaked out, and I am writing about how I am so freaked out by all that is happening. This is how freaked out I am, like, for reals, guys. She thinks that Good Stab left Arthur behind, and maybe the cat in the state that it's in, to see if Betsy has the same killer in her that's like in him, that's like in Arthur, and to see what she'd do with those animals. As the cat and the prairie dog try to feed on Betsy, she remembers the story from the journal about how the vampires can't consume anything but blood, including smoke. So the way that she fights them off is she lights a couple of cigarettes and gets the smoke in the apartment, which actually constricts the blood vessels in the animals, and then it kind of sedates them and makes them not hungry because they're just getting sick from consuming smoke. Betsy is then running away to where she doesn't really know. It feels like the story has acknowledged that it doesn't know what to do with Betsy and is writing a perspective is a bad choice. Quote, "Classes start in, who cares? I'm not going to be there. Who am I even writing to now with this? Taz, you're here with me. You too, Trace Sale. Hackers? I don't warrant that kind of attention. I think that I am actually tracing words and blood on the concrete floor of a huge empty warehouse. That's my life, too, though. That's not really here or there, is it? As all of the cool kids were saying in the 1912. Again, it makes you wonder, like, this could have been more frightening and more accurate if it was written in present tense and not with her like, I'm typing out what is happening to me, but it literally just actively happening and her trying to actively get away from the ghost of her great-great-great-grandfather who unduly has something against her. She is getting herself ready to run from her apartment. There is lots of noise going on in the apartment, to the point that the landlord actually shows up with the police to be like, what the frick is all this sound? We have a wellness check. And she's like, I thought only family could do wellness checks. What are you doing here? And then she sees all of this chaos in there. There's a buffalo head on the ground. There's poop all over the apartment. And she's like, look, I will leave and break my lease. If you'll let me break my lease, I will leave and be out of here next week. And the landlord is like, deal. And so then she just leaves. Now, what Betsy actually does is she collects Prairie Dog Dad and her cat, loads them into the car, and then drives to a nearby Blackfeet reservation on the anniversary of the Marius massacre. She says that you need to have permission in order to go onto the reservation, but she's not asking permission of anybody but herself because that's what white people do. Oh, and I should also mention, because I forgot to earlier, that Good Stab showed up now of all times because she got the journal. And it says that he showed up because he didn't realize that there were other people still alive who were related to Arthur Beaucarn. And obviously ending that lineage is part of his entire thing, and he is torturing Arthur Beaucarn, so he had to find, obviously when he found out there were still people, he needed to see who they were related, or who they were, so he could torment them appropriately. That's what it is. He showed up because the journal found a descendant of Arthur. Now at the reservation, Betsy takes the letter out that she found in her dad's book and just starts reading it out loud into the recorder that she is carrying. And she's like, I don't know if anybody will find this, but if anybody does, this is so that you have a record of it because this letter is crumbling. Maybe it wouldn't be crumbling if you didn't take it outside in the weather, in the snow, and you were wearing gloves while you were doing this. I don't know what the point of any of this is. I don't know why she needed to go onto the reservation or onto the site of the Marshh massacre in order to read this letter, which is theoretically from Arthur. I'm guessing that he was maybe made to write it under duress of being in the dungeon that Goodstab had created, but who knows? Now, when it comes to what the letter says, it looks like it is Arthur saying that he was involved in the Marshh massacre, and that is only because he came along as a holy man. He didn't wield any weapons like he had said he didn't, but he did tell some lies to the soldiers in order to get them to not hold themselves back. And they also came across these people that he knew were a peaceful sort of Indian and not a marauding sort of Indian, but he didn't really care because he wanted to get back to base camp in order to eat more of the delicious pudding that he was eating before they had to go on this hike. And yes, it is in this book, in this freaking letter, that he was like, I'm eating this delicious pudding. This pudding is so good. I want to get back to the freaking pudding. It is so good. So I told them this, quote, they're not but savages, I hissed to his innermost weaker self, making it so. If you don't stop them now, then you're as guilty as killing Malcolm Clark as are they, I added. This one is solely Owlchild's own father, I lied. Whatever it tells you or shows you will be a lie to save his son. And lastly, damning my immortal soul, God looks the other way when men must dole out justice, and I can show you in the Bible whereof it speaks that no forgiveness is necessary when those you punish are naught but savages. Would you feel guilt for shooting the fox that stole your hens? No, the fox by his acts is compelling you to take his life, even as downy feathers line his foul mouth. So it is with the pagan. And in this cold, they won't even survive the winter, will they? How could they, with their limited means and no culture? Killing them now will be mercy, an act which the Father who sees us all will look kindly on, recognizing in you a man made in his very mold and following his tenets and teachings. It's so BS. It's so full of BS. And it also changes what we were seeing actually in character for this character. And if he felt this bad, because this is such a stark difference from who he had been, then he would have been showing some sort of repentance in his own journal entries and some sort of forethought. And this is so forward. And it is actually, I would call this actually making him a straw man that wasn't in there before for this character. He says that he may not have killed with his own hands, but he was there while they did, and he warmed himself on the fires that were used to destroy the bodies and the property that were all there, and he convinced himself that they would have done it even without his influence, so he carried no guilt for what happened. So Betsy is now in her car, which is dead, and she says she can't drive it, but she is going to walk her way back to civilization after doing whatever it is she just freaking did. Why did we need to travel to a reservation in the dead of night to freaking trespass and read a letter in the snow of Montana? I don't know. Not only that, but now also with her prairie dog father, she gets a nail gun, or she brought a nail gun with her because she'd already figured she was going to do this, I guess. So she has a nail gun, and she puts nails through his head twice and into his spine and all down his back and tortures him with a nail gun, cuts off his head with a cable, sets him on fire, stuffs him with flammables to set him on fire, because she's like, well, I'm going to do the best that I can to kill him, knowing that she can't kill him. All of this stuff isn't going to kill him, but she just basically tortures her dad until the prairie dog is screaming like a man, it describes it as. This large prairie dog. She's killing her great-great-great-grandfather, or attempting to, and murdering him as brutally as she possibly can. Before she walks off with the vampire cat under her arm, she returns to civilization, and she's like, well, if I die walking, then I guess I die walking, but this is what's gotta happen. I guess she can't wait until morning to come around to then ask for help and explain why she's freaking on the reservation without permission. She would rather just walk off into the snow and die. Oh, and all of this stuff, she's talking into her microphone. So then she gets to Lydia Ackerman, the woman who has Arthur's diary, and lies about wanting to see it before she says she's going to donate it totally to Lydia. And she's like, I only need a couple of minutes with it. And so then she goes in, she's got this package under her arm, and it's actually acid because she's going to destroy the journal. And then after doing this, she goes and she gets passwords to the computer, or goes to borrow a computer from the computer lab so she can log into the website that has all of these shared files, and then deletes all of those files that were shared with her because she's trying to delete all of the remnants of this book. Which, number one, if you're not dumb, you understand that those files that were shared with you, they're saved on a computer somewhere. Like, you have backup files. Those are not the only copy, the original copy of those scans. You have copies of the scans. So Lydia actually still has a copy of this, but she thinks that she is deleting the entire copy of everything and that the book is gone. And obviously it's not, because we're reading this journal as it's written as a journal. And this is so stupid. Like, I don't understand why it was trying to delete all of this stuff, or making this the big climax where she's like destroying everything. And then she goes outside. Oh, and also, how did she go into that place with the book? Which one? She could have claimed it for herself. She didn't need to lie about it. She could have just claimed the book and then burned it at her house at her leisure and not given permission for anything to be printed. That would have been a better choice and less dramatic than bringing acid into this secret museum thing and then burning it there. But whatever. So she does all of this, gets into the computer lab, deletes stuff. Again, we've got no interaction where there would be interaction from her doing this, because Lydia doesn't say anything about the acid burning of that book or the lies. There is no interaction with anybody in these schools. It just tells you where she is, what she's doing, and then she leaves and she goes outside, and then there is Goodstab on a horse, and she raises her fist into the air like she is the end of Breakfast Club, and is just like, I'm solid with you, Goodstab. I've done it. And he just turns the horse around and walks away, and she's like, he's doing what the Indians should have done to Clark of Lewis and Clark in 1806. I understand. Have a good day, sir. And that's the ending of that. That's literally the ending. So, hey, we've made it. Now, first genre / audience for this book, it is adult literary, especially leans on literary. The language is harder, and a lot of, if you look at the DNFs, specifically talk about how it's harder to get into because of the language. And I would also say the writing style of the letters and the way that it does a story within a story within a story makes it a harder read. I would also call it slow burn historical, because it takes a while to get into anything. It is billed as a horror, but I personally didn't feel like it was horror. It just felt like a typical revenge story to me, with a lot of slow burn between things. And then when you got to modern times with Betsy, it just felt wacky and comedy and like, don't take me too seriously, but also morality wagging. Going into the hook is full of intrigue for this book, with the 3 different perspectives that are very interesting to pit against each other. You have the opening with the character from 2012, who is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Arthur Beaucarn, which tells us that this will be a story within a story. And then you have Arthur's perspective, the Lutheran pastor from 1912, who we'll learn eventually was part of the cavalry, or interacted at least with the army in the early 1900s. And then you have Goodstab, who is giving his record of being a vampire and his tribe and what he went through, and then why he is doing what he is doing. The way that Goodstab appears at the church in these robes, and the way that he is recognized by Arthur as somebody wearing the clothes of his victims, which were common at that time, is also very interesting and full of a lot of intrigue as to like, why are you here? What are you doing here? And it does a good job of like not telling you, but at the same time, there should be tension there, obviously, as I said, because of what Arthur knows about the Piccuni and his own personal guilt towards things. And there is just like this absolute ignorance, as if he couldn't remember even ever having spoken to an Indian before. So it's kind of weird. Writing / language. From the opening of Betsy's perspective to Arthur's to Goodstab's description of his life, this book has very strong word of mouth / passing folklore vibes about the way that it was written. It's not a story happening, but it's one that you're just sitting around listening to after it's already happened, listening to somebody talk about their lives. There is, I think, a weakness in this, the way that this is written, that none of the characters have a strong voice. They all pretty much talk exactly the same, and it makes it very obvious by switching between them. And it's so strange too, because Goodstab's chapters should be written like they're Arthur retelling Goodstab's stories, but they're actually written more like Goodstab would be the one writing it, with none of Arthur's introspections, and also with none of Arthur like summarizing what Goodstab would have said in order to try to remember what he had said when he had talked while writing it after the fact. And then you weirdly have Betsy speaking differently, especially after the majority of the book. Like, she calls the Sun Chief after having read the journal, and that was never something she did before. I also think some of the stylistic choices of this writing may have weakened some of the horror elements by using some of the diction and the word choices that it did, which distances itself from aspects that are happening or makes it more confusing of like who is being attacked, because it never really describes the creatures with their secondary names that are going on. It doesn't really describe settings. There are no descriptions of settings in this, really. So obviously that would be more of a book thing, but this character doesn't describe anything. None of the characters do. I already said it, but I'll make it brief here. I think Betsy's perspective would have been better if it was not as a journal entry, but as an active role of like, this is today and this is her dealing with after the fact that she read it, especially because the entire time is trying to justify how she is writing this stuff down in a journal style entry. And she's like, oh, I'm talking into my voice recorder, my voice memo, and hopefully somebody will transcribe this someday, which also includes her talking in thoughts that she would be having at the time. But you wouldn't be writing this down. You wouldn't be necessarily saying any of this out loud. Quote, but I can't live in my bedroom. Here goes. I'm in the hall. Arthur Beaucarn isn't here. He isn't here. Oh shit. Hey, yeah, it's me, Granddad. I'm just going to... not getting this to stab you. It's just in case. No, stay there. Stay over there. Stay over there. Stay. How do you say that in German? Verboten. Shit. No. Just make it literally not a journal entry. And then you have weird choices like this, quote, my great-great-grandfather, see, this monster from legend turned him into a giant prairie dog because he's done a massacre up here on your land. So I brought him my tray-sail, which is French way of saying who he is. I brought him up here because what else could I do? Okay, so she's explaining to the reader her nonsensical actions, which are still nonsensical, even if you explain them. It just means that you see that your actions are nonsensical, and explaining them away doesn't change that. But also, we have gone through 40 pages of her using the phrase tray sail, never saying what it is this entire time, until finally 10 pages from the ending, she's like, BT dubs, that just means great-great-great-grandfather. Why wouldn't she use that from the beginning? But also, she's a random woman from Colorado. I get that her lineage is somewhat German, but she is distant from that, obviously, because she didn't know who her grandfather was or where he came from, I guess. And why is it now explaining it in the last? It's like, oh shoot, I forgot to explain it, so now I'm going to tell you. Going into descriptions, there were excellent descriptions when it decided to bring them up. Quote, I would like to have that between us, I think. I would like to be a part of the secret totem beneath his shirt, held close and important to his chest forevermore. As for his Indian's appearance, well, he's an Indian. The red skin, the broad face and white nose, the hatchet cheekbones, that grim slash of a downturned mouth, a distinct amusement, his eyes about our proceedings in the house of worship, but a harsh, embattled cast to his face as well, speaking of many trials and tribulations, much hardship and loss. His hair is long and oily and black, suggesting that it's not a product of Jesuit school, which is in contrast to the floor-length black clerical robe that he wears, about whose prevalence I won't even hazard a guess, as it may involve some man of the cloth remains smoldering in a gulch. As for his intentions with arraigning himself in this raiment, I have to think that it's easily explainable. Surely, in wanting to come to a white man's church, this Indian gentleman thought it vital to attire himself after the same fashion that he has seen white men going to church in. A failure to understand the hierarchy in these church walls, where the man behind the pulpit and he alone addresses suchly, is beneath having to excuse. Instead, I take this mimicry as the highest honor, and I am thankful for the childlike innocence with which it's delivered. Let the little children come to me. Yes, this is as well as I can draw him in the pages of this newest volume of my phrenic peregrinations. His bearings and posture this Sunday was the same as last, I should add. Shoulders square, spine straight. I was initially discomfited with how his eyes tracked my every move. as if I were one of his wag his tails, which I understand is his people's word for dog. Though of the big-eared variety or the smaller variety with the white flag of a tail, I can't yet ascertain. But, of course, his watching me like a deer he would roast on a spit actually makes perfect sense. Presumably familiar with enough English to accomplish simple commerce, he must be mystified by the water tongue I deliver my sermons with. His attentiveness, therefore, is by evidence of the consternation he trains on my word. So, like, obviously he thinks that he is having a much bigger effect on Goodstab than he actually is, and I thought that the introduction with this character and the clash of these worlds and the clash of the understandings was actually really interesting and well done, but also so different from the letter that we get at the end where he is just completely diabolical. I also think that this book kind of sacrifices clarity, some level of clarity, for voice in the description. Many things are considered normal to the voices of the characters, though they are never described, and sensory detail isn't much accompanied for in here. World building. Interesting world building with the vampires that change their appearance based on what is consumed. And the setting of the characters was also very believable. Getting to the characters, I liked how it dealt with Goodstab, and I could understand Goodstab's perspective. I thought he had a strong voice. The issue for me came when the issue for me was when Goodstab actually started sounding like Arthur further in, but obviously even from that description earlier on between Arthur looking at Goodstab, you could tell the difference of like the perspectives, but Arthur just felt progressively less important. Arthur had a strong personality at points of being judgmental, proud. Despite presenting himself as compassionate, he was a bit of an indulger himself, and that was one of his big weaknesses, which is also what came into him wanting to go back for pudding and lying literally just for pudding. Was ready to just kill people so he could get back to his freaking pudding. It started out more meaningful, I think, with the conflict of the two perspectives, but as Arthur spoke more and was seemingly so disengaged with Goodstab's story, it just felt like a lot of wasted potential between the two. I did think that they were really, really good foils for one another, and when the author allowed them to go back and forth, you got to see the strengths in the writing, but it didn't allow that enough, and in fact somehow ended up making the characters completely ignore each other most of the time. Then Betsy's character actually felt pointless, other than to continue the revenge from 100 years ago, and then be the voice to tell the reader who the good guys and bad guys were, when I don't think we actually needed that. I think it was an interesting examination and an interesting relationship between Arthur and Goodstab, and Betsy added nothing, except it made it more of a joke. Like the entire thing with the prairie dog at the end and him being a buffalo and her feeling crazy just all felt like a joke. Also, you had stuff like this, quote, "She said from the rest stop in southern Montana." Well, she typed into her faithful laptop, which is literally in her lap. It makes doing italics trickier, what with elbow room and a giant prairie dog sleeping in your backseat, but not nearly as tricky as getting out of Laramie in this snow. She also had, quote, "Fine, I give myself permission, thanks, it's what white folks do." I think that Betsy could have been an interesting perspective looking back or comparing the two or seeing the truth like of things, but she turned so quickly on her great-great-grandfather and then took on that guilt and then felt like she needed to do something, and it just weakened so much of the story to make it into, oh, he's a giant prairie dog and I'm balancing this laptop writing this out as I'm doing all these crazy things and being stalked by a buffalo head. It's just like, we were good without this. I think that takes us into plot, which overall I think it's interesting and could have done so much more with character examination, and probably actually could have been better if it wasn't written as journal entries for this and just got to be about Arthur and Goodstab and their meeting and their clashing and being in real time. I mean, it still could have been in past tense, but rather than being letters filtered through Arthur or journal entries filtered through Arthur, I think it would have been scarier to allow it to just be and to see these characters interacting and to let there be actual tension, because the way that it was written, I think, weakened the tension and the horror of all of it. As when it comes to themes, I saved this quote, "The depravity of man's heart knows no floor, and everyone in this hard country has a sordid chapter in the story of their life that they are trying either to atone for or stay ahead of. It's what binds us one to the other." So obviously that's something that carries through, because it keeps blaming Betsy for things that her great-great-great-grandfather did that she had no idea of, and that she should take responsibility for it even up to the end. And that is echoed in these final chapters where she is acting out against her great-grandfather, where Buffalo Goodstab over here is chasing her down, and you also have these things like, quote, "And you know what? Fuck it. You didn't come this far to die, Etsy Bocarn, last of your accursed name. Hell no." So like, you're not accursed. You don't carry the weight of anything that anybody else did. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. And it's going to come into this comment at the very end that is about revenge stories. But this is something that specifically weakens revenge stories to me, because you're taking somebody who is innocent of doing a thing and then making a connection to them where they didn't know this thing even existed. And even without that, you're saying that this person is guilty of something that they never did from somebody that they never met. So my final thoughts in this. For me, part of the horror was removed from this because it was literally just violence and gore. And I don't think violence and gore for me make horror. It makes a slasher, but it doesn't make horror. It doesn't make tension. It doesn't make dread. It doesn't make this is scary. It just makes it makes violence and gore. I also don't necessarily think that vengeance against your abusers is particularly horrible. Like, yeah, you can get into torture and that is terrible. Even like, I personally don't like watching torture. I don't like watching people get hurt. I don't, which I know I like some horror, but I don't go out of my way to watch stuff like Saw because I don't actually like just seeing people get pointlessly harmed. And I know that revenge is an entirely different subgenre of storytelling and that it is an insanely popular subgenre of storytelling, but I don't necessarily think it falls into horror. It falls more into action for me, like this does too. Though what happens with the becoming a vampire is horrible, and there is dread in that transformation and being separated from your family and your pack, your links, your past, and being forced to just live with what you've done, and especially not being able to escape it because you're a fish. I also think that this book crosses a line that there is so much death and so much pointless death. Like, it doesn't go over any death rituals. It doesn't, like, he cries a couple of times, but in the greater scheme of how many pages this is, like, there is so much death that it crosses into meaningless. And maybe some people would consider that horror, but like, when he is just eating people and throwing them away, and it's on top of the way that the story is being told, it's distant, emotionless, and there's just no weight to what was happening for me. Then there's really no escalation because everything is always at the same plane. It's introduced fairly early on that these bad things are happening, that he's killing settlers. The Napaquan are there from the beginning. There is no like betrayal that is entered in, because it starts out with he becomes a vampire while they're attacking soldiers. So like, it always starts out up here and it stays up here and it stays angry up here, and there is no like dip like this. So it's just flat lines for me. And then there are only so many times that you can go, I hate these people, kill these people, I don't want to eat these people, I ate an Indian, I feel bad, I don't want to, and he got revenge multiple times in the story, especially like, obviously, Bocarn, Catman, all of the Napaquan, that happened. And maybe ultimately, I was reflecting on this, and maybe it's because that revenge books are obviously just not for me, because the whole thing is going to be like cathartic. I think a lot of revenge books or revenge stories in general present a cathartic end, and like, anybody can feel free to tell me, especially if it is your jam, because I know some people that like revenge stories, but they're not really what I seek out. Surprise. There are exceptions that I will make, but and that's exactly why I give things a chance when I'm like, I don't know about this, because things can surprise you and they can be different than other things, but this just didn't do it. Ultimately, that brought me to think that revenge stories aren't for me, because they often rely not only on torture and suffering, which is not my thing, but also holding guilt over the non-guilty in an attempt to feel retribution. And I personally believe too much in redemption, or that someone can come back from their very worst moments of their lives. I don't think that somebody has to be held to the worst, and I think that you can always become better if you choose to become better, that people should generally be given the opportunity. Now, there's obviously going to be nuance, and I don't want to make any infinitive of saying like always or never. And there are people, plenty of people, that choose to never be better. But that is the difference, is giving a reasonable expression for redemption where it is possible, and not holding people guilty for things they didn't do, which this clearly didn't do, because it went after 4 generations down somebody who didn't even know this person. Revenge stories are full of anger, and I think that you can use anger very successfully in a story and as a part of a story, and even revenge stories obviously successfully. I'm not saying that you can't use any of these things and that they're not enjoyable and that they don't have an audience. That's never what I'm saying. I just don't think that they work for me, and that's partially why. I've never really thought about the why, so now that I've read this, and now that I am thinking about it, I really just can't stand the implication that Betsy is guilty of Lineage's sins that somehow, for some reason, you carry. I can't get behind Goodstab's perspective, or the message that was there in that last theme that I mentioned, where it's like everybody is trying to run away and hide or beat their way out of the sins that they carry. But it's like, I mean, yeah, people are, but not always. And people seek redemption, unless you tell people that seeking redemption is pointless and that there is no such thing as redemption. You just have to get vengeance. You just have to be given justice by somebody somewhere. But we never actually talk about the innocent people that Goodstab kills, because he kills children. He kills women. He kills a lot of people. But we only approach what was happening to Goodstab by the Nepequan, and not the other way around. And it was more even when it was in the perspective of Arthur and Goodstab than when we went to Betsy and it started saying that Goodstab was only the victim and that he was justified in his vengeance against the Nepequan even 100 years later. And then you have to add that on top of the fact that Arthur is a pastor, and we didn't even get any exploration from his perspective on the idea of redemption for him, on the idea of redemption for Goodstab, if he thought that Goodstab came in for redemption as he would come into a white person's church. There was nothing. When specifically as a Christian or a Lutheran pastor, you would think that there would be something about redemption, but there is no exploration of that. There is no discussion of redemption. There is no fear. There is no and he should be begging. He sees that Picuni and he should be thinking, "Oh God, forgive me, for I have sinned." And he should be on his knees, and he should be writing in his stupid journal about just how much he needs forgiveness, because the devil has come knocking for its bill, man. But we don't have any exploration of that, because there is no exploration of the theme of redemption, because revenge stories do not allow for any sort of redemption. They are just about punishment. They're about punishment to everybody, even those unincluded, and putting guilt on everybody that could possibly be connected, even by the thinnest amount. And I think that a life in a world where nobody can find redemption, period, from their worst moments. But I think it's depressing and sad to not be able to even consider that redemption is an option. And I compared this, I couldn't help it, because obviously my book is also set in the late 1800s, and I couldn't help but compare it to my own Western and how I am approaching it with like Bill Cassidy, who did a lot of terrible things, and we'll explore many of the terrible things that he did in his past. And then he found purpose in life and a reason to change, and he did everything that he could to deserve the person who gave him something else to live for, that gave him something to believe in. And personally, I think that that is beautiful, and that's something that I believe in. And I think that ultimately that is why, when it comes to revenge stories and why they don't jive with me, it's likely because they're antithetical to who I am. But that's my guess. And I think them's my thoughts. So let me know yours. I'm looking forward to the comments, discussions on this book, on the thoughts on this book, the themes of this book. While I didn't necessarily enjoy the book, I did enjoy parts of it. I enjoyed the craft of it, and I enjoyed the discussions that it starts. But with that said, looking forward to your comments. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
To my children, Tommy, Ike, and Annabelle, if you forget everything else I ever said in the lifetime we shared together, I need you to remember 3 things. 1. Minimize violence done to and by women. As givers of life, it's against their nature, God's design, to do harm, and every act of violence done to them is meant to break their souls, turning what should be a giver of hope into a black widow, a woman who destroys the life and the mercy of her care for no other reason but the corruption of her own self. It is only when you come across these kinds of women that you should put them down, for they are no better than the men who tarnished them. However, take no glee in what must be done. Finding any life so far gone, a black hole is where someone's heart should be, leaves only one solution: the mercy of death, and it's a tragedy when it happens. Make no mistake, a woman's love is the most powerful thing on this earth. It can start wars, end them, and change the devil himself into someone God sees worthy of giving a second chance. She don't owe this love to anyone, but she do carry it around with her so long as she's living. That is why the devil will do everything he can to pervert women's nature and destroy their innocence. Of every crime you can commit during your lifetime, be it out of daring or necessity, for every defiance you may act out against God, government, or man, avoid harming the innocent, for the day that we become bloodthirsty beasts where love don't exist anymore is the day hell on earth has come. And as bad as it may seem at times nowadays, we ain't there yet. 2. Everything you do in your life will create consequences, both seen and unseen, extending further than you can imagine. Nothing you do exists solely within your arm's reach. Think about every decision you make, every action you take, because you won't know how long your choices will stalk you, be them destructions or blessings, rumors or history been made. The truth of the matter is, your life will be controlled not by the truth of what you've done, but by the way others carry on about you. And the thoughts of others are more real in the long term than what you know to be true. It won't stop affecting you just 'cause it ain't real, and no matter the life you've lived, most men can't outrun what's written in them in ink. It ain't hopeless though. Be firm in knowing who you are outside of the noise, and live beyond the means of the news of the day. 3. There ain't anything stronger than a family you build for yourself. What you put together is worth fighting for. Protect your loved ones with your life, and they'll give theirs in return. Family ain't defined by blood, understand that. And for as strong as the bonds of your family are, know that you'll find just as much passion in the people who hate you. While you'll risk your life for those you care about, those who find your existence to be an insult to theirs will risk themselves to put an end to their affliction. As cruel as it may seem, a man who hates you will stop at nothing until one of you is dead. It's a mistake to believe anything different. Don't let you be the ones taken from, be it by outlaw lawmen or by someone in between. The only one who'll be looking out for you is you and your kin. Maybe there's another way to be, but in all my years I've seen the worst of man, I ain't found another way around man's desire to conquer against all else. There ain't a changing of that mind, and sometimes I believe there ain't the ability for man to change at all, least of all through lead or legislation. I ain't claiming to be right about nothing. On many things, I don't want to be right. But what I do want is for my kids to live a better life than the one I did and avoid the mistakes that I made while finding the truth and purpose in what matter more than gold in this country. It's my hope that by sharing the things I learned that my kids will be better than their old man ever was, and that what I done isn't what people remember me for, but who y'all are going to become. That'll be the legend of Bill Cassidy.